Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. I'm Brother Minister Cepeda, and for those of you guys who are familiar with the channel, you've already subscribed, you already know that I begin every video and I end every video the same way. So the beginning is an intro into my website. Please visit it at treeoflifeoutreach.com. Again, that's treeoflifeoutreach.com. It's a holistic ministry that I established and operate to provide nourishment for the mind, the body, and the spirit. Now, I do this by uniquely balancing and synthesizing services such as philosophical consultations, ISSA certified fitness training, and clean-hearted spiritual teachings and practices. There are additional services that I also provide under that guise and under that umbrella of those three features. And those other two services are youth and young adult mentoring and counseling, as well as clean-hearted spiritual practices. Well, I'm sorry, I mentioned that, as well as good old-fashioned inspiration and motivational teachings and speaking. So visit the website, go over the bio, familiarize yourself with me, the path that I've trodden, to give you guys more understanding of why I think the way I think and how I've arrived at the place I am in life and the views and perspectives that I have. Be inspired, be encouraged to know that this thing we call God, some call infinite intelligence, some call first source, whatever you're comfortable referring to it as being, it is alive, it is well, it's still on the throne. If it did it for me, it'll do it for you, because truly there's nothing special about me. There's nothing deserving about me. But there is something ultra special and deserving of he that dwelleth in me. And I believe he dwelleth within you as well, or else you wouldn't be watching this video. So thanks for tuning in today, guys. Be sure to hit the like, hit the subscribe, and leave a comment. You know, I did a video yesterday, I believe, about, archon, and I did basically a crash course summary, if you will, on archons and the entire cosmology of archons. So this is kind of like a part 2 to that, but not so much. But I am going to mention them in regards to how they benefit from from the fact that we are now currently living in what can, by any stretch of the imagination, cannot be considered anything other than a trauma-based society. Doesn't matter if you're a professional, doesn't matter if you are a layman's or anywhere in between. If you know what the word trauma means, then you do not have to be a Harvard grad oceanographer to connect the dots and realize that we are living in a trauma-based society. And that's not just here in the U.S. That's not just here in the Western culture. Although here in the U.S. and in Western culture, it does seem to be a little more prevalent and predominant. But in any event, this is a worldwide epidemic. So if you just know what the definition of the word trauma means, then you can see how we've all, to some extent or another, whether we've healed those wounds, whether we're in the process of healing those wounds, whether we are totally ignorant to the fact that those wounds exist, the fact remains that we have all been traumatized, and that's the gist of what makes up our day-to-day lives collectively. So if you guys have to pardon me, I'm going to ask for you to pardon me in advance. Like now I have a puppy over there that I'm going to have to actually be quiet. Shut up! I do apologize for that, guys, but he seems to respond better to a very stern voice as opposed to the fuzzy-wuzzy. But in any event, just staying on message about this trauma-based society, and to kind of loop right into that, the fact that, again, if you're familiar with the video that I dropped, the archons, about the archons and their cosmology, then you are aware of the fact, whether you got the information from anyone else, you're aware of what archons may have a different perspective on it or whatnot, but at the end of the day, you have a clear understanding about what they are and how they operate, and you know that they feed off of the human emotions, the low energy human emotions, things like love, compassion, joy, hope, kindness, courtesies. All these things defeat them a lot quicker than instantly and a lot faster than immediately. They cannot stand it, period. But when we are operating from our lower selves and these low energy vibrations, jealousy, hate, fear, envy, lust, greed, and those type of things, then these inorganic entities, they feed off of that. They need that to sustain their very existence. So do your research on those, the archons, and be it with my video or any other video, do your research on it so you can get a better understanding of why it's important for us to not operate in those lower energy frequency patterns, and why it's very imperative that we operate from our higher selves. Again, things such as love, hope, and compassion, and so forth and so on. We must do this in order for us to not only save ourselves individually, but to save society as a whole. Now, given, you've heard me say several times, if you're watching in my other videos, some of this stuff is been predetermined. Some of this stuff has to happen. You know, the butterfly, it's inevitable that the caterpillar must die in order to give birth to the butterfly. That's just the way that works. But there's a certain thing that the butterfly, that the caterpillar is endowed with, innate knowledge that causes it to know that they have some say in the matter. Like they just don't want to roll up and die on the middle of the forest floor, because they'll never become the butterfly, because some bird will come along and gaffle them up, eat them up. So they have this innate sense of the fact that even though those things are predestined to be, they can have some control on the outcome and have some influence on what happens after it all happens. So a caterpillar will crawl in a certain spot, they'll attempt to put themselves in a certain position, and that will influence the abilities that the butterfly is born with right off the bat, or what they can develop in its span of life. So even though some of these things are predestined and they have to happen, we can have an influence on it by making sure that we operate in these higher energy patterns. Also, we need to be mindful of the fact that this is basically, which is what I may title this video, this trauma-based society is a smorgasbord to these archontic forces. It's a literal smorgasbord to them, because they're going to get love here, they're going to get hate there, they're going to get jealousy, they're going to get some envy, they're going to get some fear, some lust, some selfishness. They're going to get all this based on our human emotions and the energy that we release with our human emotions. So we have to be mindful of this, and we have to take steps, very practical steps, so that we can develop strategies and tactics on how to overcome this. Number one, by being conscious and mining our own human emotions, and knowing that there are these things that don't meet the human eyes, but they do exist, and they are forever trying to influence our behaviors, influence our thoughts, because as you know, they cannot create anything but their ability to invent things is almost limitless. So what they do is they sit around and wait on us to have certain thoughts, to have certain emotions, and then they feed off of that, and then they loop that back to us and causes us to think something even that much more drastic, or think along that low energy pattern even that much more longer, while they continue to feed off of it and construct a society that benefits them, one that is trauma based, one that's traumatized, one that's the mind and the soul and the spirit has been fractured. It's been fractured. And whenever there's a mind or a soul or a spirit that's fractured, you know what something is fractured, you know what that means. That's another word for broken. And if something is fractured or broken, then obviously it's not connected, it's not tight. So there is an opening there because it's broke. If you break a pencil, if you break a line, whatever, if it's broken, then there's an opening there. So once the human psyche has been traumatized and thus fractured, these entities have been and continue to come in and influence behavior that exacerbate the problem that much more. So we need to make sure that we are aware of this, and we can take a step back and say, well, how did we get in such a state? The human mind is designed, first of all, to focus on one thing at a time. Doesn't mean you're not aware of a myriad of other things, but your mind was created to focus on one thing at a time. This is why if you try to do something like roll your left arm forward while at the same time rolling your right arm in the opposite direction, it's very challenging, it's very difficult. This is why it's difficult. This is why, just to cut to the chase, this is why the good book teaches that this supreme creator, and we can talk about if it's the demiurge or if it's the ultimate one true and living God, but it gives us signs and symbols by saying this powerful force created one thing at a time. It said, let there be light, and then after there was light. Then it said, let's separate the oceans from the land. And then it said, let us create trees. And then it said, let us, create the inhabitants of the seas. Everything was created one step at a time. So now we're living in a society that makes our mind that much more fragile and that much more susceptible to becoming traumatized, because everybody has this multitask type of thing that they are engulfed in. And if you're not able to multitask, you looked at as being slow or lame or indifferent, whether you are intentionally choosing not to multitask. And take it back to the old school days, where if you are anywhere, I'd say maybe 45, 55 or older, your parents raised you up, teaching you and learning you the benefits of doing just one thing at a time. That's all we were taught. Do one thing at a time. And then all of a sudden, this, what I call this machine culture that we're living in now, where everybody's plugged up to some kind of machine, whether it's the cell phone, the Instagram, whatever it is, everybody is connected. So I call it a machine culture. Now, I did not coin that phrase, but that's what I call it because I heard it, it made sense, and that's what I call it as well. So that's one of the ways where the human mind is being set up for failure. It's a trap to be multitasking in the first place because, again, the human mind is exposed. It opens itself up. The spirit, the mind, the soul opens itself up. So instead of you focusing on that one thing, when your mind would be sharp, crisp, and focused, you focused on doing this, doing that, doing that, doing that, doing that. So your mind is scattered and open. What's another word for scattered? Schizophrenia. So that's one of the ways we have been led down a path to make us more susceptible to being victimized by this archontic force who, again, they can't create nothing, but they have to wait on us. They try to provoke us. They try to entice us, lure us to think a certain way, and then they can take that thought, because these are inorganic beings, so they can drift all around us without us being aware of it. And so they just sit around and do different things, or just wait for a person to feel a certain way, and then they loop that back and have a person either continue to stay on that path, or as a result of being on that path, they'll feed them another negative thought. And this is sustaining them. They need this in order to exist. So now that you know that you are being used, your human emotions are being used like a puppet, what are you going to do? Are you just going to continue to go along with that self-destructive path that is not even your choice? You know you're engaged in self-destructive behavior. And now you know that it's not even you who is making those choices, even though it seems you're consciously choosing to be rude. You're consciously choosing to be negative. You're consciously choosing to be a pessimist and to do all these wrong things. It seems like you're making those choices, but the fact of the matter is, a vast majority of people is under the influence of the archontic mind. Their mind have been taken over. They're not aware of it. They have no idea. But now this information is being brought to the light. So what are you going to do? So I touched very briefly on one way in which the human mind has been set up by the powers that be, who are wholly controlled by these archonic beings. These are the ones who gave them the thoughts about creating, a slingshot. Hey, that worked pretty good. Well, yeah. Well, how about you? Then they give them a thought. Well, how about you create some spears? Man, what if you can throw that spear in a lot faster and put it in a little bitty piece of metal instead of that big spear? Now you can just make, instead of that giant spear, now you can just make a gun, and so forth and so on. Why would you make just hand grenades, man? You like the results you got with that. How about you shoot for an atom bomb? You like the results you got when you stepped on that person's back and betrayed them, and you got all that promotion with the high raise and the better job. How about you step on a few more people's faces? How about you bend the laws in your favors? Our society is set up by people who are under the archon mind to begin with. So if they are operating from the archontic mind, and they are, then how can anything that's in our society not be under the same influence? It's the same architect who designed the whole picture. So another way, so we got the one way where they set us up in with this, multitask, this idea of multitasking. But then they did something, and they've been doing something a lot more direct to not just put us in a mindset where we can be easily traumatized. Because when you're multitasking, your mind is all over the place. You're doing several different things at the time. So when somebody walks in and say, "Hey, man, how much longer you're going to be on that computer. You snap out. It's easy for you to become irritated. It's easy for you to become agitated because your mind is open. It's not zeroed in like it was intended to be. So, but what they do to go from just putting our minds in a place where it can be easily traumatized to actually traumatizing it is the things that we see every day. It's the things that we've seen dating back to the story that we got about Jesus Christ and how he was beat down and tortured. Don't even let me get started on the Mel Gibson movie part of it. All the different movies, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and all these different horror films where human beings are just being treated in the most foul and most repugnant of ways. When the mind is seeing that, that's trauma. The mind doesn't necessarily know if that is happening on TV or if it's happening in real life. All the mind knows is that it is experiencing that. That's all the mind knows. Now, you may know in your intelligence and your basic day-to-day life skills and awareness, you know that it's on TV and it's just a movie, but the mind doesn't know. And so the mind is being traumatized. And not just by those type of movies on TV that are purposely put out to get a specific reaction / to specifically traumatize the mind. And please get me right, I grew up watching all those kinds of movies. Unfortunately, I let my children watch those kinds of movies because I just wasn't smart enough at the time to know better. So one of the other things that they do instead of just the movies is they give it to us up front. Like you watching on your TV back in the day, and all of a sudden you see something that couldn't do nothing but traumatize you. Whether you was aware of it or not, it traumatized you and everybody that saw it to its core when you were watching repeatedly on TV John F. Kennedy getting his brains blown out. That's trauma. That's trauma. That traumatized you. And if we look at some of the things that trauma does, we don't have to look no further. Not that we have to even look there, but for those who may have a opposing view, we don't have to look no further. We can just roll out our war veterans, the people who have seen hand-to-hand combat in a war. And they don't have to be in the army. They could be some of what I call my brothers from the hood, who've seen real life tragedy and drama inflicted on a human being. You know how those war vets return. They ain't never the same. Their mind has been traumatized. And this is an archonic smorgasbord. Because what does it mean when the mind has been traumatized? If we look at those combat soldiers who return from overseas, or we look at somebody that's been in the hood, somebody that was on a police force, anybody who have engaged in actually seeing that hardcore drama, we know how they react. We know how their behaviors are. There's paranoia, there's anger, there's fear, there's sadness, there's anxiety, acts of violence. These people are all over the place. And keep in mind, you don't have to take my word for it. And if you do take my word for it, then shame on you. Because you shouldn't take anybody's word for it. You are an adult. You are learned enough to know I do my own critical thinking. You do your own critical thinking. You do your own critical research and analysis and reach your own decision. So do your own research and let the science tell you what happens when a person experiences trauma in their lives, and let them further verify for you after you conclude your research. I'm 100% confident that there's no question about it. If I drop this ink pen on the floor, there ain't no question if it's going to hover there for a minute, if it's going to take off in the south or north, or if it's going to fall straight down, or if I drop that ink pen, there's no doubt about where it's going, how it's going to end up. And it's the same thing if you do your research. The science will tell you that the human mind does not know the difference between watching some trauma on TV or being engaged in it in real life. So we have all been traumatized, and this creates the archon smorgasbord. Why would they ever leave our planet? Why would they? We giving them everything they need. And to just kind of paraphrase just a little bit without getting off message too much, this is what dude is mentioning in the movie The Matrix. This is what he's meaning in The Matrix. When he said that they was fighting against this enemy and they bombed the enemy and turned all the skies black, thinking that was going to wipe out the machines. But then the machines found out they had all the energy that they need from the human body, because the human body is based on electricity. So why would they ever leave our planet? We feeding them, we sustaining them, unconsciously just behaving like a bunch of hooligans as a result of this trauma, and it is nonstop round the corner. So not only is it an archon smorgasbord, it's an all-you-can-eat smorgasbord that never closes, 24/7, 365. And so again, I ask you, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to continue to just not pay no attention to yourself? You're going to continue to deny the truth and just think, oh, you're just a bad person because you're just a bad person. You're just a bad person because that's where society is at right now. See, you should always be leery when you see most people walking in the same one direction. You should be leery, because you should be learning enough to know that most people don't know what the heck they talking about in life or in their day-to-day personal affairs. They just don't know. They sheeple. They need someone to tell them what to do, tell them who to be, and tell them how to be it, when to be it, where to be it. So whenever you see the masses walking in one direction, you might want to pump the brakes and do a real good search of an investigation of what's really going on. The same thing when you hear a whole bunch of people spreading rumors, talking about somebody. You might want to pump the brakes. Because again, the masses don't know what is going on, not even with their own selves. So don't follow the masses. Don't be a certain way because that's the way society is. Take responsibilities for your emotions and know that when you don't, you are feeding, something is feeding off of you. It is literally feeding off of you. When you go to bed, while you sleep, when you wake up, when you're daydreaming, when you're at work, when you go work out, when you're praying, if your emotions is continually in that low energy vibration, there is something feeding off of you, and it's determined to keep you there. So every time you feel like you're feeling good, it's going to send some girl in there to look at you and roll her eyes to drag you right back down. It's going to send some guy in there to walk by and bump into you to drag you right back down. Because again, the whole construct of this society has been put together by those who are operating from an archontic mindset. Truth be told, if we gathered up the masses, gathered up everybody on this planet, and had them sit down in front of a licensed professional, or a guru, a prophet, whatever you want to call them, doesn't matter, a licensed professional, a scientist, whatever, I'm willing to bet you that 85%, at least 85% of people are suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. Except it's not post, because the fact of the matter is we're going through it each and every single day. So just imagine that soldier who has went through that and has came back to society, and now his mindset is all over the place. Mass hysteria. Again, anger, frustration, schizophrenia, paranoia. This is the gist of what predominantly everybody in our society is going through. And if you set them down in front of a professional, or set them down in front of a guru, a master, whatever you want to call it, they would be diagnosed with having post-traumatic stress disorder and everything that goes along with it. Schizophrenia, paranoia. You can't be driving down the street and happen to look over there and see somebody pick their nose without you thinking they did it to mess with you. They just messed up. You can't have nobody say anything positive to you at all without you thinking that, they probably was being disingenuous or insincere. Post-traumatic stress disorder, that's not post. It's continual and it's constant. And again, there's that phrase again. It creates an archon smorgasbord. These things are living off us and feasting off us. And I'm not talking about during those times when you naturally and organically feel bad. You naturally and organically feel angry. You have righteous indignation. You have justifiable sadness. You have a bout or encounter of jealousy or whatnot. I'm not talking about that, because all those things can be attributed to the normal human experience. I'm talking about when you decide that you're going to dwell there. Oh yeah, when you're dwelling there, you're being feasted upon. And there is a force that's always around you that is determined to keep you there, because it needs you. It needs you to stay alive. It's like a tick on a horse. It ain't trying to lose that horse. It ain't trying to let that horse go nowhere. And it'll fight, and it'll do whatever it can do to keep that horse there. They got some of them. I have to make sure that I'm not misquoting the insect that it is, but I'm pretty certain that it's a certain kind of ant who needs its host, and it's developed this real unique fungi that when it attaches to its host, a horse, these ants flood that horse's bloodstream with a certain chemical that causes the horse to go right to a certain spot where the horse eats all of this ant's larva, and then the horse doesn't normally or naturally, if it's not infested with these certain ants that's attached to it, it would never eat that. Do your own research and just simply Google insects that control host insects that control their host. So we have been given signs and symbols within our own human awareness that this type of mind control exists. The ant attaches to this horse, floods its bloodstream with a certain chemical, and causes the horse to go and feed off of some ants' larvae, so the horse ingests it, and then it takes those ants in, gives birth to those ants in its fecal. They cling back to the horse, and the process continues unless the horse has been disinfected from it some kind of way. So the fact that something attaches to something else and then controls it and have it engage in self-destructive behavior and conduct, this is nothing new to us. Not those of us who are learned, and not those of us who are interested in becoming learned. So the ants do that to the horse, and the archons do that to human beings. They attach to you and get you to behave in self-destructive manner and conduct. And here's that phrase again. It creates an archontic smorgasbord. You see the madness when you go out there. You see what what appears to be everybody is into. Witchcraft, energy vampirism, all this way out stuff that they think, just like that horse thinks, oh, I want to go try this today. I haven't had that. They think that they are consciously making the choice to be engaged in witchcraft and in energy vampirism, energy stealing, and putting monkeys on people's back and all this nonsense that they call it. They think that it's just them, but it's not. That's not that horse. That horse would never eat from there. He's only eating from there because he's under mind control. These ants have flooded his system, and now he gonna go do something that's gonna make his situation just that much more worse. So here's that question again. So what are you gonna do? I have some information that I'd like to share with you. Some recommendations, some suggestions, some advice on what I feel are very practical yet very comprehensive strategies and tactics that you can implement to begin to free yourself as well as those that you love. Because all of these different movies about the Walking Dead and the World War Z and all these different movies about zombies, this again is telling us a story, it's telling us a vision. That's why it's called television. It's telling us a vision of some form of infestation that engulfs the human planet to where people change and become something less than human, even though they are walking around in their human bodies. So this is basically a different oscillation of the story that I'm referencing now about the archons. So if you can fight, then fight. We're not talking about a physical war because these are inorganic physical beings. They're like little specks of electricity or electromagnetic, almost like beams of light or some kind of inorganic. They don't have organs and all of that. So it's not a physical bite, and it's not a physical fight. This is a mental, a psychological, and a spiritual battle. Anytime something that's invisible can attach to a person and take over their mind and have them engaged in sodomy and evil and just keep them in a state of jealousy and fear and all of that, that's not something you can just go punch somebody lights out like you could on a street corner. But if you have the awareness, if you have the compassion, if you have the strength and the desire to want to be better so that you can make a better world for yourself and those you love, your kids, your grandkids. And if you can fight, then I encourage you to fight. Here is some advice that, based on my own journeys, has worked for me and continues to work for me. Maybe it works for you, maybe it doesn't. All I can tell you is this: what's worked for me. It's worked for the hundreds of clients that I've prescribed it to. It takes some time. I wish I could tell you that it's going to be easy. Once you start, it's going to be over. You know, it'll be easier. I wish I could tell you that, but I can't. I can't say that, not and be honest at the same time. So it's going to be tough. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be challenges. It's going to be pitfalls. You've heard me say 1,000 times if you watch any one of my videos, this is a journey of 1 trillion miles that's made with bleeding feet. But you compare 1 trillion miles and bleeding feet to the eternity of your soul, and there's no comparison. It's more than worth it. So the first step, the first piece of advice, and I'm going to move it along with these guys. Again, go to my website, treelifeoutreach.com. My contact information is there. If you have any questions, what you can do a little bit more specific to you, your specific situations and circumstances, you can contact me. You can also, that would be the best way, but you can definitely leave a comment. And I would definitely seek to respond via those comments as well. But the first very simple yet practical thing that we can do is to simply be aware. We can be aware of this. And again, if you take my word, if you're taking your parents' word, if you're taking your spouse's word, if you're taking your pastor's word, if you're taking anybody's word for this and anything else in life of significance, if you're taking someone else's word for it, then shame on you. Period. Point blank. Case closed. End the discussion. Forget about it. Shame on you. Because that's not what a true human being does. A true human being gets the information, does his own research, does his own study, his own analysis, and so forth and so on. We are critical thinkers, left on our own natural path of development. But as we know, most of the stuff that's happening to human beings nowadays is not natural. It's not organic. It's inorganic. We're being guided. We're being led. We're being coerced. No different than all this looting and rioting all across the United States for Brother Floyd's death. But you ain't never seen nothing like that. Who, the powers that be, they can't stop this looting? No, they want that looting to keep going on. There's that phrase again, archon smorgasbord. They could stop it a lot faster than that if they wanted to. And when it's push come to shove and they wanted to, and they want to, that's what they're going to do. It's not going to be no weeks to get nothing under order. They're going to deploy whatever troops and whatever information and strategies they need to deploy, and boom, just like that, it'll be over with. So the first thing we have to do, guys, my first recommendation to you guys is simply be aware of this truth, that something is feeding off of you. It's attempting to feed off of you. It's attempting to feed off of me. It's attempting to feed off of every human being on this planet. And it's not necessarily because it's an evil thing. It's not necessarily even that. It's just a thing that is doing what it needs to do to keep living. It needs us. So when you look at it from that perspective, it's like, I can't be mad at it because it's doing what it needs to survive. But doggone it, I'm not finna fall prey to it. I'm not finna be victim to it. Because at the end of the day, it comes down to him or me. And him or you. Or them and us. And if you have something inside of you that says, hey man, enough is enough. I don't subscribe to the nonsense that's going on this planet. I'm different. I'm willing to be different. I'm willing to pay whatever price I may have to pay in order to be different, but I'm going to be a loving, caring, strong, brave, compassionate, stand-up person. And then the chips gonna fall where they may. See? So if you're that kind of person and you can fight, then fight. Step number one, be aware of this fact, man. Be aware that something is seeking to manipulate you, seeking to live off of your emotions, seeking to keep you frustrated, keep you angry, keep you jealous, keep you in a state of fear, so it can literally feed off of you. So just being aware of that is powerful, because that knowledge can liberate you. It can begin the steps of your liberation. That's the first step, because if you know this person is trying to get you to leave the house at the same time so it could steal your money, if you know that, then setting the appropriate actions is going to follow relatively easy, because you know, you are aware of it. / game over. The gig is up. So that's the first thing we can do. That's the first step, is to be aware of it. And when you find yourself out of balance, ain't no big deal. Don't beat yourself up about it. Don't wallow in it. Just gently pull yourself back into balance. And this is going to take an enormous amount of energy. This is going to take an enormous amount of focus, an enormous amount of decision making, conscious decision making, consciously deciding, I'm aware of what I'm thinking right now, and this guy is trying to provoke a reaction, or this girl is trying to provoke a reaction, or my situation is trying to get me to feel a certain way. I'm going to consciously decide that I'm going to take a higher route. It's going to take an enormous amount of physical, mental, psychological, social, emotional, and spiritual energy. But it's worth it. I promise you, it's worth it. And like I said, I can't tell you that it's going to be easy. But I can tell you, if you keep on with it, it gets easier and easier. Just like a 1,000-mile journey, when you're walking on bleeding feet, those first few miles, those first few 100 miles, it's going to be torture. But you keep right on walking. Before you know it, that pain, you became basically numb to that pain. It lessens, it lessens, it lessens, it lessens, and to the point in which it all vanishes. But you just have to be willing to stay the course. So be aware of it, and that's empowering within itself. Another step. Make yourself. I mentioned this slightly when I said don't follow the crowd, but I want you to also make sure you don't follow the propagandas. The propaganda that says this group of people, because of the way they live, you can look at them and tell the way they live, they're just better than everybody else on the planet. This is what the news says. This is what the propaganda teaches when it shows a certain race of people in their mansions and on Wall Street and this and that. It's projecting this notion that these people are the superior people. That's why they got the Wall Street and the fancy cars and all the success. That's why they run the planet. Don't fall for that propaganda. Don't fall for that propaganda. We're going to show these people living in huts, sleeping on the floor, doing nasty bust down videos and doing, killing each other and selling drugs. These people are the worst on the planet. This is why they're always showing those people in that light. Don't fall for the propaganda. Don't fall for the propaganda that says, oh, the economy might collapse. What are you going to do? And you should do this and you should do that. Don't fall for that fear. Don't fall for the propaganda or the dogma. Don't fall for the dogma, which is living your life according to someone else's thoughts and rules. Don't fall for the dogma. Be independent so far as your thinking. Now, if you think it through and you research it through, and then it lines up with what everybody else then is doing, then so be it. What I'm saying is think it through, study it through, research it through. And don't just go with the masses. It's always better to walk alone in the right direction than to follow all your friends and buddies who's walking in the wrong direction. So have the courage of your convictions to be independent, make your own decisions, and trust yourself. Okay? So don't fall for the propaganda. Okay? That's number 2. Number 3, analyze yourself. Do a very, very step-by-step, very comprehensive and very systematic breakdown of you and everything that you can think about you. From your finances, to your relationships, to the way you think, to your belief system, to the way you live your life, your favorite colors, any and everything that you can think about you. Do a systematic breakdown of you and make sure determine if whether or not that's really you, or is you just that horse under the influence of those toxins injected into a system. You've been told your whole life your favorite color is blue. You never really even thought about it. Perhaps your favorite color is orange. Perhaps your favorite color is green. You've been told your whole life you don't like these kinds of people. You never even questioned it. You've been told your whole life this is what you like to do when you go to work. This is a career that's for you. Your parents told you when you was 9, when you was 6 and 7, you're going to be a doctor. You never questioned it. You've been a doctor all your days. If you sit down and think about it, you might realize, you know what? It pays good. But as far as offering me some fulfillment, it really sucks. So any and everything about you can afford to be deconstructed and put under a microscope. Okay? That's an additional thing. Last but not least, you can hold yourself accountable. You can hold yourself, and you can hold anyone that you have a day-to-day relationship with, you can hold them accountable. Don't make excuses. Don't make excuses. Hold yourself accountable. If you didn't perform the way you know you should have performed, hold yourself accountable. Get up, dust yourself off, look forward to the opportunity to redeem yourself. Got somebody in your household, they're living outside of what you know is solid, constructive behavior. Hold them accountable. Sit them down. Look son, look daughter, look wife, look husband. Hold one another accountable and let them know, hey, look, if you see dad slipping, if you see mom slipping, brother, sister, hold me accountable. Call me to the mat and say, hey, Dad, was this just a moment where you were organically sad, or you was going through a period of righteous indignation? Because the way I viewed it, it seems like there was no rationale or justification for you to be behaving that way. So I'm just wondering, had you just fallen off at that moment or during those few hours or whatever? Or what was going on? To give them permission to hold you accountable. So again, very practical steps. Very sound. Nothing over the top or psychedelic about it. Just straight to the point. But these are the things that we can do to help us make a change. Unless you're happy with the way you're living, unless you're happy with the way you're being, and if you are, then hey, this message ain't for you. This is for those who demand more of themselves. This is for those who know there has to be more to life than just a job, having kids, paying bills, and then dying. There has to be more to it than that. There has to be more to it than me getting up and the first thing I want to do is piss somebody off or siphon some of their energy or focus on them. Every moment you focus on someone else is a moment you miss focusing on yourself. So if you're the type of person who is okay with that, just living your life, what I call basically just waiting to die. Just waiting to die. Keep on paying bills. Keep on going to work. Keep on having kids until the end come for you. What? If that's the kind of person you are, then I know you flipped off this channel a long time ago. You flipped off this video a long time ago. So the fact that you're still watching this video tells me you know that there's more to you. You know that there's more to life. And you're determined to get it. By any and all positive and constructive means necessary. So these are the steps that I have for you guys, man. And this is the way that we can begin to lead ourselves and our loved ones, as well as a collective society, up out of this madness. Because for everyone who saved themselves, then they obligated to go save someone else, or at least try. At the end of the day, we can't save the world. The world has to save itself. We can't save the world, but we can have an extremely, we can have a very high impact on how and what happens when this thing they call the end takes place. So that's what I have for you guys, man. Be aware, walk in that awareness, mind all of your thoughts, do a systematic breakdown of yourself and everything that you think you believe to be true, your conduct, anything you can think about you, break it all down to make sure that that's really you. Okay? resist the propaganda, the news, and the dogma, of our forefathers and our, founding fathers of this nation, who laid down a belief system that basically everybody has just blindly picked up and been following ever since. Avoid the dogma, avoid the propaganda. Be strong enough to have the courage of your convictions. Do your own independent research, study, and things of this nature, so you can live a life that's appropriate for you. Because at the end of the day, your voice box, your laugh, the iris in your eyes, your fingerprints, all these things are unique to you. No one has your exact laugh. No one has your exact iris, fingerprints. So there's a certain life that is specifically for you to live. Some of the outer pieces, or quite a few of the outer pieces, may line up with what your wife or your husband do, what society do, or whatever. But at the end of the day, your fingerprint may look like someone else's fingerprint on the paper, and it may have a lot of similarities. But at the end of the day, there's always something very unique about it that sets it apart. So be you, okay? Hold yourself and others accountable, particularly those who you come in daily contact with, or perhaps even a stranger on the street. If you hear her being rude to that old lady, and you know that you can trust that you can approach this situation appropriately, safely, and basically hold her accountable. Like, come on, that's an old lady now. I'll help you, ma'am, and I apologize on her behalf that she's even talking to you like that. Hold people accountable, particularly yourself. Don't let yourself off the hook. It's not how many times you fall, it's how many times you get back up. Hold yourself accountable, hold everyone in your household accountable, and give them permission and the okay to hold you accountable as well. Okay? Again, avoid the mainstream. Avoid the mainstream. And I'm not just saying that just for the sake of avoiding the mainstream. I'm saying that in the sense that says, hey, be careful about what the mainstream is doing. Because typically the mainstream, they don't get it right. They don't get it right. The mainstream is sheeple. Now that's not necessarily a happy thing for me to say, but it is a truthful thing for me to say. Most people are just sheeple. They're not going to get it. And you trying to make sure that they get it, you might as well go get, you might as well try to teach third degree algebra to a pigeon. It's not going to matter how hard you try. It's not going to matter how much you love the pigeon. There's nothing you can do about it. So don't worry about the masses. When you walk in your light, you're not going to fit in with the masses. No way. There'll be people there to comfort you, people to assist you, people to pick you up when you're falling down, pat you on the back when you need it. But there's something about walking that unique path that you will always, for the most part, be outside of the mainstream. Like I said, doesn't mean you won't have friends. You will. Doesn't mean you won't have those there to help you. You will. It's just the masses of people. When you walk in your individual path, that's what individual means. You don't walk, you don't walk in the crowd, you stand out in the crowd. So don't worry about the cool kids. Let the cool kids, those are the ones jumping through the hoops and trying so hard to be what it is they want to be and not trying at all to be who they really are. So let the cool kids do their thing. At the end of the day, the cool kids can be likened unto the fool kids because they have forfeited their own individuality, their own sense of self-authenticity, and that means the cool kids basically amount to the fool kids. So that's what I got for you guys. Thanks for watching. And again, like I said, I start every video the same. You heard how I started that. I finish every video the same, and that is I don't know all of y'all, but I do love all of y'all. That is as true can get. This is that real, holistic love that'll give you a pat on the back and or a foot up the. So, but it's all going to be did out of love. I love y'all. That's just straight up and down, side to side, cat a corner, in a circle, triangle, however you want to however you want to, balance it out, man. I love y'all, and that's as real can get. Here's the truth that I subscribe to each and every day of my life, and that is, if you are feeling bad, go make somebody else feel good, and you'll feel better. If you are already feeling good, and you go make somebody who's feeling good, and you go make somebody who's feeling bad feel good, then you will go from feeling good to feeling phenomenal. This is how I live my life, and that's just the truth of how this thing actually works, guys. The powers that be know this, and they have used this on us in reverse. So people have been brainwashed. Here comes that phrase again, archon smorgasbord. People have been brainwashed into when they feel bad, the first thing they do is go try to dump it off on somebody else, project it out at someone else, and there you can see the archon smorgasbord never ending. So don't do that. When you feel bad and you want to feel good, go make somebody else feel good, and you'll feel better. That's just the way this thing works, guys. Thanks for tuning in. I am Minister Cepeda, and I will shoot you guys another video as soon as my Heavenly Father instructs me to do so, which I'm being persistent in my consistency. So thanks again. You guys have an incredible day, night, AM, wherever you guys are, and then holler back, okay? Thanks.